Come restore and make us new. God, we need.
Welcome back to Everyday Faith Radio. This is Jeff Gaffney, your host, and with us on the program, making her second visit with us, is Janet Centini, my good friend. Janet, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome, Jeff.
Janet, we've got a lot to talk about, and none of it is easy stuff to talk about, but there's a lot of our listeners are going through hard times, tough times, sickness in the family, death in the family. We hear from a lot of our listeners about that. You have been on this show before and shared your story, and I was wondering if you could go back and tell us just a little bit about, we want to talk about your son, Jeffrey, and your experience with cancer with Jeffrey, and really want to talk about that part where kind of your faith came in and helped you. Let's start there with the diagnosis of cancer and how faith came in and helped you during that time. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit of that?
Sure. Jeff was 16 years old. Well, actually, he was 15 when he was diagnosed. And you can only imagine it was probably one of the worst moments of our life. I remember him, his first words to me were, "Am I going to die?" And from that moment, my husband Lou and I felt this incredible power and just so much of God being with us, by able to talk to Jeff about it and say, listen, we're going to do three things really well. We're going to love you as much as we can. We're going to love your siblings as much as we can. And we are going to trust in God that no matter what happens, we'll always be together. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to kind of quiet the waters a little bit. I mean, there's no quieting the waters when there's a cancer diagnosis, especially for your child. But there was so much, you would think that there'd be more darkness in it, but there was always that pinprick of light. Mm-hmm. And I think now, understanding it a little bit more, going back and understanding more of the Bible, really realizing that light and darkness really exist together, where I didn't really know if I understood that prior to his diagnosis. Mm. And I also feel that, our life was beautiful, we thought. Everything was cool. Everything was going right. And you don't expect that suffering enters into it unless it does happen. And I think from the beginning of understanding a little bit more about that life is not just all about those good things, but it's also about the hard times, but staying together and really holding on to loving one another. And I think that's what we really grabbed on to.
I saw how close that your family is always, your immediate family, you and your husband Lou and your three children. I saw how close that you were before, and it seemed like from a distance, because we were neighbors at the time, it seemed like you all just grew even closer, and so your goals of loving each other really well, it just seemed like that occurred in a multiple way, and it was really encouraging, for those of us that were kind of on the outside. Now, tell me, for any of our listeners, if they have a friend who is a relative who's been diagnosed with a disease, let's call it cancer in this case, what advice would you say in terms of a friend? How do you want to receive your friends? Do you want to hear from your friends? Do you want space from your friends? Because I think that oftentimes is kind of a question of how to treat your friend whose kid has cancer. Do you want to hear from us? Do you want to see us? Do you want us to bring the food? What advice would you have, or does it just sort of depend?
It does depend, very much so. There are times when that support is so important to you, but for me in particular, it was one or two good friends that would then be able to share the news of what was going on with everyone else. Now, there's so much social media people put out. There's these Caring Bridge pages that people put out, and that's very helpful. You kind of you kind of circle a posse together,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a small group of people. At least there was a small group for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm often asked when someone else has been diagnosed, what should I do? What should I say? And I say, just be there for them and let them know that you're there. But you need to step back. There's nothing that they can do. People want to bring food. That's the biggest thing.
Right.
Bring the food.
Right.
And while that's appreciated, sometimes there's too much food, and you just need to know when to kind of back off. There's no answer. I think the platitudes of, well, there must be a reason for this, or, God only gives you as much as, a strong person can handle. People don't want to hear that at that particular time. It's more a matter of, I can't even comprehend what you're going through, but I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the biggest thing.
So
that you
just
can do.
the physical presence is helpful, and then kind of when you're ready to, because you may have some things, as the mother of a child with cancer, you may have some things that you want to offload, some frustration, some emotion, and so just to have a friend there to sort of kind of catch that, it seems like is very valuable.
Well, I think that was very important to me. Now, other people, everybody, this is as individual as we all are.
Sure.
This is as unique as everyone is.
Mm-hmm.
Different people need different things. I mean, our personalities, some are more extroverted and want those people. And then we have the introverts, and we need to stay away. And then when you have a 16-year-old son who's kind of calling the shots
Mm-hmm.
And says, well, that person's not coming to visit, or I don't want anyone to visit me, he often felt like he was on display. And that bothered him a lot. And so we really did what he asked us to do. And if he wanted visitors, we allowed them. And if he didn't, we said no, not today. This isn't a good day. But I think it's such an individual time, and so unique to each person and each family. Our family, everything stops, I guess I want to say. For us, it was just all about how can we love one another. And I'm saying this, and I truly mean that's what it was all about. All the stuff that's happening around you, whether cars running in front of you, or you're standing in the grocery store, all the things that you thought were so important, you realize that none of it's important. What's really important is the relationship that you have with one another, and loving, and for us to love Jeff and to love his sister and brother as much as we could. It was a full-time gig.
There's two verses in Scripture, not exactly sure. One, basically, I think it was the Apostle Paul who said that we are called to bear each other's burdens. And so when a loved one is hurting, like you were in that instance, to come alongside and help kind of shoulder the load a little bit was one. And then the second one comes from the book of Romans. Paul was talking about the importance of rejoice when they rejoice, and yet mourn when they mourn. And so kind of be there in the highs and lows. And gosh, that's one of the things I'm sure you experienced with the whole cancer ride. There's highs and lows. Everybody tells you you're not supposed to get too happy or too upset, but as a human, that's almost impossible with the kind of the way it goes.
It is impossible, and I think you really understand that joy and sorrow live together. And to me, I thought maybe I made that up after the whole journey. I thought, oh, can you believe this? Joy and sorrow, but they really do. They're part of who we all are, and it's a gift to have that understanding when it comes. But not everyone can understand that. And I wouldn't want everyone to go through what I've gone through to understand that.
We've talked about that a little bit on the show. The book of James in the New Testament starts out with, count it all joy when you're going through trials in life, which is counterintuitive, because when you're going through the hard times, how am I supposed to find joy in this? But when we end up experiencing the presence of God during our hardest, toughest days, we find that in his presence is fullness of joy. And so oftentimes what drives us there, unfortunately, is the hard times. It's the sorrow that you mentioned. But just, you and I, and certainly you've experienced a much different form of suffering than kind of what I've gone through, or any of our listeners are going through. We all have our own stuff that we go through. But you wouldn't, as you said, you wouldn't necessarily want anybody else to go through it, but you wouldn't trade it because of the joy that you experience when you have faith and bring God into the situation.
I mean, that's it. That's dead on, and it's a interesting place to be. And I thought for a long time, I thought that something was maybe wrong with me, that I was thinking these things, and it took a while to resolve that. Would I give up everything that I know now to have Jeff back with us? And that's been a journey in and of itself.
Wow. We're talking with Janet Centini, and she's sharing with us her journey with her son Jeffrey during his cancer diagnosis. We're going to take a break in just a second, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens to your faith when you lose your child, when you lose the battle to cancer. What happens at that moment? And I think this will be an encouraging message for any of our listeners that are going through a tough time. This is Everyday Faith Radio. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Please stay with us. So sweet. Her name is Janet Centini, my good friend. She and her husband Lou were neighbors of ours for a good long time, and we've been lifelong friends, and look at us now. But Janet, we had the opportunity to kind of walk beside you during the diagnosis of cancer for your son Jeffrey, and then ultimately his passing. And the one thing that I noticed about you, I just really felt like during those really tough times, right? Well, kind of the whole journey that I saw, it just really seemed like God was holding your hand during a lot of it. It just seemed like that there was the presence of God with you. And as you look back on it, can you kind of see where God came in and kind of held your hand and kind of and helped lead you through a really tragic time in your life?
Well, I think he was there all the time. I remember very specifically sitting in a closet crying, thinking, what are we going to do next, when things started going downhill, when the chemo wasn't working, when remission wasn't possible, when bone marrow transplant went out the window, and it was just one thing taken after another thing. And I remember thinking about Matthew 11:28, I believe it is. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. And in that closet, I lay down with my head on a pillow, and I just surrendered and said, I don't understand this. I don't know why. I would do anything to take it from my son, but if I can't, give me the strength that I need. And he was there. He was there for me all the time. Prayers from other people. There was a time when I couldn't even pray. And it wasn't because I didn't want to pray, I just couldn't pray. I was tired and exhausted and overwhelmed. And a very dear friend of mine said, don't worry, we have you covered. And
I love that.
That was a beautiful thing for me. And I would think, okay, I don't have to think I have to pray because there's some magic genie in the sky. It was more that I felt so filled with grace, and that was a gift. And it wasn't a gift that I asked for. It just seemed to envelop everything around me and around our family, and just allow that openness. It goes back to the love again. It was simple.
I love that, though. I love that advice for somebody who, if you have a loved one going through a tough time, whether it's something like what you went through, or and you're trying to figure out how to approach your friend who's going through this tough time, and maybe their prayer life has gone a little dry, and they're just frustrated about that. I just love what you just said, that to be able to kind of come on beside somebody and offer some intercessory prayer and say, hey, let me take that from you, and at least, you know, give you some rest and let you get refreshed, but fear not, I'm going to be praying for you. I'll get in the gap for you.
That's right. And you know, how many times does the Bible say, don't be afraid?
Oh, my
Be not
goodness.
afraid.
Yeah.
And that was something that was a little bit of a change for me, having grown up a lifelong Catholic, where a lot of the times we didn't have a lot of Bible study. I guess I never really saw that. Or maybe I saw it and I read it, but I didn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And just that idea of not being afraid and understanding that there was a God who wasn't a punitive God who was going to do this or take Jeff from us because he did something wrong or I did something wrong. It was more a matter of that we have this God that could comfort us and take care of us, and that he actually understood because his son died on the cross.
Yeah.
And I felt so strong in that sort of faith that is something, it changed me. And, you know, I'm eternally grateful for that. And as much as I miss my son, and I do miss my son, it's very difficult to answer for any one person because our grief is all so unique. So for anybody experiencing these things, what I'm saying may not fit, but there's those bottom line things that when you love somebody so much, it's going to hurt. And then there's hope, and there's a softening of the grief, and a gentle breeze that somehow comes over you with time. And then it hits you again, you know, and that's part of this whole, the journey of just being there for somebody else, is understanding that there's no timetable. There's no timetable for me to say, well, my grief is over. If it was, I've got to tell you, I love my son more than I've ever loved him.
No.
And that is something that surprised me and delights me. And I've come to understand more and more. They don't go away. They become there's a part of the tapestry. You know, you see the front part of the tapestry, and it's this beautiful picture. But if you turn the tapestry over, it's a bunch of colored threads, and it doesn't look quite the same as it looks on the other side. And that's how it feels sometimes, that you're a new person because you understand so much more of those paradoxes in life, that it's a gift to understand that, but it's kind of scary in the beginning. So this takes a while. You know, I'm almost 12 years out, so it's a little different than when it first transpires. But I think allowing people to support you and help you, and allowing some sort of light to shine in your eyes is something that's so incredibly important.
And that 12 years later, I would imagine somebody who has just gone through losing a loved one could see Janet Centini 12 years later and say, gosh, look at her. She made it through. Janet, I'm also wondering, does it help you now, 12 years later, to somebody who has a new diagnosis, and the fact that you are so schooled in cancer and dealing with cancer with a child, does it help you now? Help is maybe the wrong word, but does it provide some purpose for you to help somebody who's just entering into a cancer diagnosis, knowing kind of you have the wisdom of already gone through it?
Well, I think there's certainly a new purpose in life. Things that I have gone through in the past 12 years and things I've been a part of, never in my wildest imagination could I have imagined myself today, 12 years ago. So that's one part of it. I think the other part of it is Yeah, I mean, I get call. I have a lot of phone calls.
Mhm.
That so and so was diagnosed. We're still very involved with the Children's Hospital with newly diagnosed children, and yet there is a little something, to say that you need to step back from that newly diagnosed, because I am on the other side of it,
Right.
and I've lost a child, so I'm very aware of that, and not wanting to push myself on someone, but I'd be there for anybody in a heartbeat. And I think that's the gift that how we honor and remember our children, by being able to give something of what they gave to us back to other people.
We're talking with Janet Centini, and we're traveling with her on the journey from diagnosis of cancer with her son Jeffrey, and then ultimately his passing, and then 12 years later. I can't believe it's been 12 years.
I know, I can't either.
Unbelievable. Janet, was there a time when you really started to kind of question your faith after the passing of your son from cancer? Or was by that time, did you have so many encounters with Jesus that your faith kind of grew stronger? I see it kind of going one of two ways, where on the one hand, during the dark days, you experience Jesus, and so as a result of that, your faith grows, or you kind of turn from that and you get mad at God. And I see that happen a lot with people who suffer from tragedies in life. Can you speak to that at all? Was it something where your faith grew, or did you go through a period where you were kind of questioning your faith?
To be honest, I never questioned my faith. It actually grew. And that surprised the heck out of me. Because I think other people were questioning more. But everything that I had gone through, and the times that I was able to spend with my son, and to be with him on his last days, and his journey, and the things that we talked about and were able to share, only helped me realize that there is eternal life. And I've never stopped, and I continue to try to grow as much as I can every day.
I love how you say that you love Jeffrey more today than ever. That's just so encouraging to see that even 12 years after the death of your son, that the relationship still matures in a way. I mean, that is just such an eye-opener for me, and that's so encouraging and fascinating. And I'm hoping for any of our listeners that are dealing with cancer, or maybe they've lost somebody, to see what Janet has gone through, and how her feelings have matured over time. It's just a beautiful thing with your son. Janet, thank you again for sharing your story. God has been with you, and it has just been an honor to be your friend and to walk beside you. And thank you for the really, really good advice, particularly the part that you shared about the importance of a friend stepping up and getting in the gap and praying for you during a really difficult time. Thank you for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jeff.
You're the best. Janet Centini sharing with us on Everyday Faith Radio. Again, make sure you check out our website. It's mark5ministries.com, or send us an email. We would love to hear from you. everydayfaithradio@gmail.com. Thank you again, and have a blessed Sunday. We'll see you next week.